Is karma punitive, or does it hold wisdom for us? Tune in for a deep dive into the role of karma for personal growth, past lives, and the Akashic Records. Expand your understanding of karma and its impact on our lives as Tom Lane joins us to explore how our choices shape our destiny and how ultimately we can make positive changes in our lives and the world. Stay tuned.
Welcome to Exploring the Mystical Side of Life with your host, Glenda Lang.
Hi, this is Glenda Lang from ThoughtChange.com. We are exploring the mystical side of life. Once again this week, I have poet, storyteller, and fellow spiritual explorer with me, Tom Lane. Welcome, Tom.
Thanks for having me.
We have an inspired conversation ahead of us talking about karma and the Akashic Records. So, Tom, do you believe in past lives?
I do. I have a healthy skepticism about the formless world, but I've had enough experiences where something is transformed. And then there's this other, I don't know what it is, this other expression where I feel like, geez, I know this person from somewhere, or I've sat in a church like this. It actually, the first time I really experienced it, and I was sitting in one of the pews, and I looked up, and all of a sudden things began to shift, and I went, "Oh my God, that was in Italy, and that could have been the 1500s or something like that." And then I always double check. I have to, do my reality check, whatever. But I have found that it explains a lot of phenomena for me. How about you?
I have had several, I guess I would say, spontaneous past life memories. I'm also a hypnotherapist, so I've done a number of past life regressions.
Yeah.
But those ones that just bubble up from the unconscious, that have something to do with your life right then and right there, they're so powerful. And they contain information that explains so much about life right now, the life that we're having right now. I don't typically investigate to see if it's true, because in my mind, I guess I don't really care if it's true. I care that it's bringing me information and insight that can help me in this moment.
I totally understand what you're saying. My skepticism is a bit like yours. It's, I will check that. Does that feel right? Does that feel like my ego? Does that feel like that? And ultimately, I'll just let it go and incorporate whatever the experience was into my body of wisdoms or truths or whatever. Past lives have gotten a bad name because everybody was a movie star, or Cleopatra is a notorious one. But I like the fact, because a lifetime seems so short. I mean, here I am I'm not a young man. I feel like I'm just beginning to lace up my shoes and get going on the walk. And the thought that this is a continuum of a very long, intricate path is comforting to me, and also it seems true.
It does seem like a very short life, and yet when we're younger, it seems like that old age is so far away, right?
Yeah. Youth is wasted on the young. If it was any other way, it wouldn't be youth anymore.
I had a very profound moment in Portugal last year. We were on vacation, and we were on a tour boat exploring caves on the coast. And our tour guide was a very spiritual person, but he made it very clear that he was not religious, he was spiritual. And there was the pilot of the boat, myself, my husband, the tour guide, and a friend who had come to visit us in Portugal. And I just made this comment about how quick the time goes by. And every person on the boat repeated the exact same words. So all 5 of us were in exactly the same space. And it was like our souls connected. It was so beautiful and so profound that it was almost like etherical in nature. And I could really feel what a gift this life really is, and how sad I'll be when it's time to leave. That I just love it so much here, which, if we look at our day-to-day life and the kind of mess that it seems like we're making of the world, probably most people would rather, step into the spirit world and into heaven and not be bothered here. And yet it just became so obvious in that moment that it was a real gift to be here.
I had experiences where being alive or being dead was really the same thing. I mean, it's really hard to explain that one. And I remember walking around in the middle of that experience and looking at people passing me on the street. I was going, "Oh my God, this is such a miracle. Don't frown like that. Be happy. It's amazing." And of course, I lost that, but that was a quintessential, in my zigzagging life, that was an epicenter of, okay, I get, and the gratitude for that moment and the gratitude for the work and being able to find joy, despite all reasons not to, is the drill.
You had a taste of your eternal self there, because it's that self that we feel in the moment that goes with us.
Yeah.
Right? Beautiful. That's beautiful. Now, how does karma figure into this eternal being that we are?
I think karma has to do with a deep understanding of the goodness of all souls and the fellowship of all souls, just as basic. Then as a departure, when we have had certain experiences that we would consider bad or self-destructive or having to do with hate or evil or something, that we get banged around a bit, so we start building up layers of protection, which are misguided because there is no protection. But because there is some awareness, unconscious or otherwise, of the basic goodness of self, every time there's a departure from it, I can speak for myself. Every time I'm mean to someone or I do something where I'm ashamed of or whatever, because it's on some way, on some scale, it's balanced against my own. I don't believe there's a force out there with, karma police punishing you because you were a bad person. I believe it's at least collaborative with the self and what other forces are out there. But it hinges on some basic understanding that we're good. And when we break that vow to ourselves, that we seek punishment or correction or something. And so we will then magnetize these experiences that allow you, not you, but one, to do better and to be accountable. That's a big word in karma. So that you can clean up this as you go through time. And hopefully, if you're astute enough and you've been able to get away from denial and egotism and all that stuff, you can return to the native state or get closer and closer to it. And so what karma is a checks and balances thing that is to some degree under your own control in terms of choices you make.
So, Tom, sometimes the person we're the meanest to is ourselves.
Amen.
How does that work into the whole idea of karma?
Well, that's a really tough and interesting question. Where does that come from? Why is it there? I think that's part of the punitive thing, is that being accountable and responsible, instead of working with self, one punishes. That doesn't help a thing. As a matter of fact, that coats the armor even thicker you're now fighting yourself. But I think that is one misguided attempt to be better. But it's so misguided because it doesn't help at all.
Yeah, and sometimes it's so unconscious that we don't even know we're talking to ourselves that way.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Very interesting idea to think that we might actually accumulate, so to speak, karmic debt by mistreating ourselves.
Yeah, that's your country, yourself. That's the one you have to get the division out of initially so you can manifest that better in the world.
And then, of course, you were talking about the Akashic records and these patterns that we have set in place how many lifetimes ago.
Yeah.
It could even be more challenging than we imagined to break them, or perhaps more healing than we can imagine when we can actually shift that in ourselves.
I think, and this is me in progress trying to understand, is that all the symptoms of previous incarnations are here, are now, are with us. And I read somewhere it was a Buddhist statement about, you want to know what your karma is? Look right now at where things stand, what you're trapped in. You know, those are all your cards being shown from the deck of you.
So, Tom, have you had any experiences where you've had a past life recollection in a time when you really need it, and then you had the awareness of a similar circumstance in your past?
I've had ones that manifested both good and bad karma, and I don't even know the time frame or where or what planet or whatever, but I was not a good person, and I was doing really bad things, and I really soaked in that world, and all the justifications I had for it being okay for me, all the reasons I said to myself, this is righteous, this is not bad. But what that did for me is that it allowed me to, having walked in those shoes, be able to appreciate almost all forms of behavior, good, bad, terrible, beautiful, whatever. And so that really helped me when I was finding myself judgmental. It really helped me be less judgmental because, oh, I know that one. Oh, murder, mayhem. Oh, I know that one. And so it helped me through a period of time where I could understand better. Not that I agreed with, and not that I didn't have a problem with those activities, but I could feel compassion for not the behavior, but for the being behind it. And then on the other side, I touched base with a lifetime in Tibet, and I could see how, as a young person, I could see how that was really informing a viewpoint I had for myself and why I was here and what I was trying to do and how I needed to also leave behind certain constructs I had come to. How about you?
Well, the one that pops into my mind in my working life when I was employed, I had this job that I really loved, and then there was a management shift, and I got a new manager, and it became so difficult. And I just kind of put out to the universe. So this is my tip for anyone listening. You know, really, you just have to be open. I wasn't even expecting an answer, but I was just kind of talking to myself saying, what is going on? And I had this spontaneous memory of being a very early Christian. And this woman in this life was a Roman soldier who killed me in that lifetime. And I thought, oh, boy, that explains a lot.
How did that change your behavior towards this person?
It brought me some kind of peace, which is very strange. Like, I didn't blame her. It just explained how there was this unconscious pull between the two of us. And it was actually very shortly after that that she left the department. I don't know why it was so important for me to know that that happened. Maybe it had to do with the allowing and accepting of it, but I just understood from a different level and allowed that to be. So it's a really interesting experience.
Totally, yeah.
Do you think there's a need to actually mine a person's records to discover past lives and bring healing to these wounded parts?
Interesting question. When I first encountered the Akashic Records, it was just the concept of being a database of past lifetimes. And it was a phenomena. I didn't really get into it too much at that point. It just went, oh, wow, what a concept. All of the past lifetimes of all the folks that have walked the face of the earth are now recorded. And I had the concept of a library, and that you could then use this library to find out what somebody did or what you did, in what you had for breakfast in 1412 and who you killed in 727 BC and who you cheated on. And fairly recently, I decided to really get behind it, and I read a couple of books, and I had some readings. And it was less about the data, more about the wisdom, more about what you're going through as a soul. And it wasn't so much directed towards lifetimes, although that was kind of embodied. It was really profound and interesting and came up with answers. It's almost like talking to your higher self. That said, it's kind of like when we were talking about karma before, that it's a handy way of seeing things. And I think we all need guides and teachers and people who have been out in front and helping us. There are many ways to gain access to yourself. That's one of them. There are other ways of doing it. I don't think it's mandatory. I have found it helpful. I will say that. Have you done readings as well?
The first experience I had came through a hypnosis, and I wasn't actually trying to go to the Akashic Records, but I actually walked through a control room, and there were all these like TV screens on the wall. And if I looked at any screen, I was in that lifetime.
Oh my Lord.
Completely. And so I had the wherewithal to like pull myself away from looking and like kind of walked by the screen because I was being led somewhere. And that was the very first time that I understood the Akashic Records to be not just a library with kind of like three-dimensional details of a life, but the actual experiences that you could get into and relive or re-experience and change because you can make different choices.
Yeah.
Now, Tom, you are a storyteller.
Tis true.
You have written a book called The Karma Factor,
Mm-hmm.
and it is a fiction book for all of the listeners who are tired of reading nonfiction spiritual books. And this is an opportunity to have spiritual teachings in a fiction format. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the book, Tom?
It's an unusual book. I'm finding out it was completely natural and organic to me. It's a metaphysical thriller, and I love those two together. I love putting opposites together and having a synthesis that creates something different. And it's sort of a cop, an ordinary cop who suddenly, due to some experiences, has to grow beyond his badge, how I've framed it. And because his life has been saved, he has a chance, and he begins to explore other realms. Meanwhile, on the other front, he is chasing a serial killer who's taking out very prominent Americans. And so these two forces, the 80% cops and robbers, but it's backlit, I like to say, with wisdom of souls who have graduated from the earth plane, who are wanting Earth to handle and people of Earth to handle their karma, as opposed to jailing and executing criminals, is to get behind what's really going on, which may have happened 300 years ago.
It's a spiritual awakening of a sort, right?
Yeah.
It's almost time to wrap up. Is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners?
We find ourselves in a very challenging time frame. You can look back and see that kind of every generation would say this. We have global warming, which makes it quite a bit different. At least this is for me. So I felt that it's an all hands on deck kind of thing, but I also really think it's important to know there are lots of different kinds of decks that you can bring yourself to. It can be activism, it can be artistic, it can be just waving to the postman. It can come to many different levels, whatever your deck has to be. But what I have found is the more that I sort of leaned into my purposes, the things that I care about, the happier I got. And the more exposed I am to the world and all its agitations and glory, the more utilized I felt. So if that makes sense to you, I recommend just notching it up a little more. And thanks for all the great work you're doing currently.
Another question popped in actually while you were talking. We talked about individual karma.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me a little bit of your thoughts of collective karma.
I always go back to a quote by Einstein who said, "You can't solve a problem from the same state in which the problem was created." And that one really increasingly sunk into my marrow. This is what's called upon. And for me, I took it as a challenge. This is why I'm here, because I have been living a sort of a life well within a comfort zone. And somehow I knew that I was, it wasn't just in denial. I was making less of myself by not following that voice. So this collective consciousness, it depends on all of us moving a step forward in our own estimation in terms of our purposes, and also leadership. We have to get leadership that has consciousness, that is part of this movement, who will direct traffic in that direction, not away from it. We need to up our game just across the board.
For sure. And it's not about one person saving the world. We all have our part to play, and that part can be doing your inner work. I do think that there is kind of like community karma. And again, to reiterate what you said, it's not like, a policing kind of thing, but a growth thing, so that, okay, we've learned this, which was maybe not such a great idea and not so effective and created a lot of problems. How can we make a better choice? And if we find ourselves in that pattern over and over again, and we keep making the same choices, then that rut becomes deeper and deeper ingrained, and it becomes a little bit more challenging to see the other potential choices that we have. But I think that there's always choice, and that in the end, it probably doesn't even really matter, because we are eternal beings and we're just here for the adventure, right?
Right. Insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different outcomes. Something new is being asked to be born.
Tom, if people would like to learn more about you, do you have a website?
I lucked out. I got my name there. It's thomaslane.com, and come join.
Well, thank you so much for being my guest today, Tom.
Thanks for having me. It's been really fun. Thank you so much.
And thank you for listening to this week's edition of Exploring the Mystical Side of Life. You will find all of our conversations on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio. Come visit me at thoughtchange.com. Pick up your copy of Learning to Listen and start your own inner exploration today. That's it for this week. We'll see you again next time. Bye for now.